If you're fast, but you're still tight in the hips, you might want to watch this video to understand how to actually lengthen and then strengthen the hip flexors properly for speed, okay? So we're gonna break down 3 different ways on how to actually open up the hips to be able to gain access to actually strengthen the hip flexors to be able to pick up the leg quicker and get more stride length. If you look at the fastest runners, they're breaking 90 degrees in each stride, right? How do they do that? Long hip flexor, long hamstring. Creates that separation, but they're also able to pick up the leg even faster. How do we implement that with our training so we can go out to the field and be able to do that, be able to get longer strides, be able to actually have long strides but have them be fast as well, right? You don't want to just be bounding, right, like a gazelle. You want to be fast, explosive, right, but also have length in your strides. So first off, we're going to start with lengthening the hip flexor. The easiest way to get into this is the split squat. So you can get either a step at this height as you get lower. You can get a higher step, right? I'm going to use this block right here with the slant board block on it, right? You want to keep that back heel pointed out. We're going down, right? Controlling, trying to get the hamstring to completely cover the calf. We're keeping the back torso straight. We're getting that pull on the back hip, right? As we progress in this, see how I'm getting that pull in that back hip, okay? As we progress to weighted, right? And then get into the floor. This is a good standard to be at. Keeping control, keeping that posture up. The back knee is not touching the floor. My hamstring's covering my calf, and I'm trying to actively stretch that hip flexor. Control, control, control. See, my back leg should be shaking almost. Right, so we're opening up the back hip, but also gaining strength in the knee. For the couch, you want to start, right, getting the knee all the way against the wall, using some sort of padding, right? As we get in here, we're going to lift this leg up. You're probably already going to feel a stretch. If you're really tight, you're probably already going to feel a stretch. You may not even be able to get this leg up. You might already feel a stretch in here. That's fine, right? You still want to work your way there and spend some time in it. You want to spend a minute each side. And we're squeezing the glute. We want to try and actively squeeze the glute, right? And as we get this foot more and more underneath us, we can start to build up, right? And we're opening up more and more and more. Here, we're trying to squeeze this glute, keep the abs flexed, right? We're working our way to getting the shoulders to touch the wall with the glute contracted. That's a good standard to be at, and actively be pushing, be almost kicking the wall, right? So I'm trying to open up this rectus femoris muscle right here, right? Both sides real quick, just to show a different angle. So obviously, right, you're staying here. If you stay here for a while, it's okay, right? We're still working the stretch. It's eventually gonna open up. Try to continue to, right? We wanna get the butt to heel as we're squeezing the glute, right? And as we work our way up, we're here, we're flexing the glute, We're coming up higher and higher and higher, right? We're getting there. We can still push against the knee if this is too much. We're trying to get shoulders to wall, glute contracted, flexing the abs. Trying to get that active stretch kicking against the wall. Right, so that's the couch stretch. So as we open up the front, we want to open up the back side as well. Right, we always want to have structural balance between sides. Right, you want to have flexible hip flexors, but you also want to have hamstring flexibility as well. Right, so what I'm going to start here. I'm going to show you the progressions, right? So you're starting here. Maybe you can start on a higher step, whatever it may be. We're getting here, bend both knees, extend one fully out, try to get that entire stretch down the posterior chain, switch. I want to hold this extension for 3 seconds, and then I want to switch sides. Extend out, hold, hold, hold. You want to get the blood flow continuing to press back and get lower and lower and lower until you're able to get to lower levels until you hit the floor, right? So that's a good goal to hit, but obviously you can start, right, with the split squat at a higher step and the elephant at a higher step. One thing with the elephant, okay, I don't want you to be leaning on top of the thing, okay? Bend down to wherever you can get to. If it's here, then use assistance. Do not put your weight on that side, okay? You want to have the weight in your feet. Bend, extend out, right, and you're just using assistance here. Next thing, RDLs, right? You want to open up the spine rounded, but also resisting rounding, trying to get that pull in the upper hamstring and glute, right? So for RDLs, right, having that flat back, right, instead of being rounded, we're flat. Chest is up, the butt's coming back. I'm sliding the weight down my legs, feeling that stretch wherever it may be. If it's here, then work there. If it's here, right, keep working. Keep the chest up, flat back, come back up. We're just sliding the weight down the legs. You can start with body weight, just working that hip hinge, going a single leg, right? And then working to weighted. So those three is how we first open up, right, the hips and the posterior side, right, the posterior chain. We want to first lengthen to be able to gain access to properly strengthen the hip flexors for speed, okay? Once we do that, and I want you guys to be able to do this with me. Like if you could just go and hit some split squats or hit some elephant walks while I'm speaking, and then go and do some strength work, you can do that. We don't need any equipment. You can easily do this at home, right? So 4 different ways to strengthen hip flexors. There's more, but these are my key 4 for athletes, and I believe that this is what has gotten me so much faster and gotten many guys training with me a lot faster, because of you're strengthening the hip flexor directly. You're not just flexing your abs, right? There's a difference. So first thing we're gonna start with is the L sit-up, okay? So this is the easiest way to start getting into strengthening it, okay? That front part of the leg, we're getting on the ground, okay? We're here, right? Try to keep the chest up. A good standard to beat is chest up and hands close to the knees. You wanna get in front of you, and we're just lifting one leg, trying to keep that chest up as high as we can. As high as we can, just like that, right? Alternating, getting good 10 reps is good. If you cannot do this, work the hands back and lean back a little bit. You'll be able to get that leg up. Being here is the beginner stage of actually flexing that hip flexor directly. Once you get comfortable there, we're gonna move on to the hip flexor raise. So with the L sit-up, you're working that lower abdomen as well as the hip flexor. With this, you're basically just strengthening the hip flexor directly, and that's it. You're not focusing on lower ab, it's mainly just hip flexor, right? So you can use a step. This is how we have the setup here, right? I like to just use a kettlebell on the foot to force that dorsiflexion, right, in my ankle, right? And I'm keeping that back leg straight, keeping the chest up, and I'm letting this fall out in front of me. You can hold this for assistance or whatever, and we're just getting as high as we can, directly strengthening the hip flexor. You want to get that stretch at the bottom as well, right? So I'm here. So that's basically the hip flexor raise. If that's too much or what weight you're using is too much, this is still going to work it, right? You're still going to be flexing that hip flexor in this position regardless. This looks scary to you. Hop up on a step, one step at home, and just feel that feeling in the hip flexor as you lift your leg. Once we're there, so it's L sit up, then it's hip flexor raise, then we're going to move on to the L sit. So L sit's a bit more advanced, right? But I do want to address it. So how to progress into the L sit, right? Once we're being comfortable lifting this single leg, you want to be able to lift, right? Hands in front, remember that. Chest is up. You want to be able to lift double leg. So we're here, getting reps here. I call these L sit-ups, just like this. Trying not to let that heel slam into the ground. We're controlling the way down, really flexing that in a short range way of flexing the hip flexor. When we get comfortable there, then we're going to progress to the L sit, right? So the L sit, it's a bit more advanced. You want to be able to be here and also lift the legs off the ground. So here's a good example, right? Holding this position here, right? It's a bit advanced. So what we can do is grab some parallettes, or I have some PVC pipes here, and all we're doing is being able to hold ourselves, right? If we don't have that shoulder strength to be able to fully lock out, we're using these, right, to be able to hold ourselves up and extend the legs out and fully just focus on the hip flexors, right? So you can start out with the knees here. As you work your way out, it gets more difficult, and we're just holding here. Holding for 25 to 30 seconds is pretty good standard. If you can hit 3 sets of that, you got pretty strong hip flexors, and as you get higher and higher with your feet, the more difficult it'll be, right? So here is a bit more difficult. Yeah, like trying to get higher and higher is the focus to really flex the hip flexors. Once we're comfortable there and we're able to rep L sit-ups, hip flexor raises, and the L sit comfortably, I like to use gar hammers, right? Gar hammers, killer for the hip flexors because there's so many different standards to hit, and it works into, kind of prepares you for that strict toes to bar that you see, right? So gar hammers, right? We're at 90 degrees with the legs. We're trying to hit the chest and go back to 90 degrees and not break 90 degrees, right? So notice how I'm not breaking 90. I'm trying to touch chest every time and control back down, right? So that's the first sort of level to be at with the gar hammers as you work your way up. So you want to be able to be at 20 strict reps for 3 sets. It's a good standard. Next level of the gar hammers, right? It's going to be like this, okay? So we're here, right? Keeping the legs straight out, not breaking 90. Once we're there, right? That freak standard to be at is being able to lift with the knees, extend out, and slow on the way down. Lift with the knees, extend out, slow on the way down. Right, I'll show a good example of that here. And this is like a good freak standard to be at. If you can get this for 12 reps for 3 sets, so minimal swaying, trying to focus on slow on the way down with the hip flexors, that's a pretty freak standard to be at with that. And so those are the 4 ways that you want to strengthen the hip flexors, the front side, right, to increase that stride length, starting with opening up, right, split squat, elephant walk, RDL. Then we work from L sit-ups, hip flexor raises, L sits, and gar hammer raises, right? I gave you guys a few different pointers on sets and reps. You want to shoot for those standards. You will see significant gain in sprinting, right? Explosiveness, trying to get out of a break or whatever it may be, jumping. You'll notice a difference in when you're done, you're gonna feel sore here because you're actually activating your hip flexors and it's not just super, super tight and you can't even feel them, right? So open them up, then strengthen. Open them up, then strengthen. Continuously do this and you'll see significant progress in your speed. Stay locked in.